This is the Business Lens, where we go beyond the headlines and make sense of the numbers shaping your money, your business, and Nigeria's economy. Good morning. My name is Divine Alex. Stay with me. Let's connect the headlines to your business, your money, and the economy. So let's start with a business riddle. How do you make more money while producing less? That is a question I need you to respond to. Well, ask NMPC. Now, despite pumping slightly less crude oil in June, the national oil company grew profit by almost 16% to 535 billion naira, generated that is almost 16% to 535 billion naira. Like I said, generated 4.39 trillion naira in revenue and has already paid over 6.28 trillion naira into government coffers in just 6 months. Now, maybe the bigger question this morning is this: are we finally beginning to see the commercially driven NMPC that Nigerians were promised? You see, this is a question I'm sure is on a lot of Nigerians' minds. Now, while NMPC was busy counting profits, the central bank was busy counting rule breakers. Now, after examining 34 authorized dealers, the CBN says it uncovered foreign exchange regulatory breaches by some financial institutions and has recommended sanctions. Now, most of them passed the test and a few did not. And because if Nigeria wants a stronger foreign exchange market, confidence doesn't just come from policy, which it also comes from discipline. Now, still on confidence, let's leave Nigeria for a moment and look at Africa. Now, here's a question: why should Africa continue taking fuel prices from benchmarks developed elsewhere when the continent is refining more of its own petroleum? That is the question. Now, that is exactly the conversation that the NMDPRA wants to start, pushing for an African fuel price benchmark that reflects Africans' own growing refining capacity and expanding regional trade. In other words, is it finally time for Africa to help set the price instead of simply accepting any price that they see? Now, and speaking of building stronger markets, let's check this. Now, Nigeria's electricity sector may have a new challenge on its hands as more states begin operating their own electricity markets under the Electricity Act. Now, the FCCPC is warning against creating 36 different rule books. The commission says the fragmented regulations could confuse investors and weaken consumer protection. So here's the challenge: how do you decentralize electricity without creating regulatory confusion? That is the question that we all are trying to find the answers to. Now, while government is trying to make Nigeria a more attractive place to invest, Nigerians are still spending heavily abroad. New figures show the country imported over $602 million worth of vehicles and auto parts from the United States in just the first 5 months of the year. That's more than 41% higher than the same period last year. Now, the passenger cars alone accounted for $454 million. And the question is this: are Nigerians buying more cars because confidence is returning, or are we simply becoming even more dependent on imported vehicles? Well, we'll find out. Now, let's step away from that and head straight to the next one, which is talking about Naira. Let's quickly check on the favorite celebrity. I think Naira is a favorite celebrity because everybody understands this, which is the Naira. Now, it ended July almost exactly where it spent most of the month, closing slightly weaker at 1,368.22 Naira to the dollar. Yes, it lost a little ground, but perhaps the real story isn't the small depreciation. It's the fact that the dramatic swings we've become used to appear to be easing. So has the foreign exchange market finally found some balance? Well, now let's step away from that and head to the next one. And here's the thing, right? Because this is where it becomes really interesting. While the Naira was finding its feet, investors were practically lining up to lend the government money. At the latest Treasury bills auction, the CBN offered 700 billion naira, but investors showed up with more than 3.6 trillion naira in bids. The biggest rush was for the one-year bill, where demand was almost 7 times the amount on offer. It raises a fascinating question: why are investors so comfortable lending to the government? Yet businesses still complain about access to affordable credits. This question is what we really need to ask ourselves. And finally, if you thought that that was a lot of money moving around. Here's another number. Throughout July, the central bank quietly pulled 7.18 trillion naira out of the financial system through open market operations, which is the OMO. Think of it as the CBN trying to soak up excess cash to keep inflation under control. It's lower than the almost 14 trillion naira mopped up in June, but the strategy remains the same, which brings us to today's big question. Who is really driving Nigeria's economy? Is it the government, markets, or consumers? Are the numbers finally beginning to tell a better story? And more importantly, are ordinary Nigerians beginning to feel it? Let's find out after the break. My name is Divine Alex. Stay glued. You're welcome back. This is the Business Lens of Rapid Television. Now, take a look at this week's business headlines, and a pattern begins to emerge. NNPC is reporting stronger profits. The central bank is tightening oversight of the foreign exchange market. Regulators are proposing new energy benchmarks, and government agencies are shaping the future of the electricity market. At the same time, investors are pouring trillions into treasury bills, while Nigerians continue spending hundreds of millions of dollars importing vehicles. It raises an important question. Who is really driving Nigeria's economy today? Is it government policy, market forces, investor confidence, or the spending decisions of ordinary Nigerians? That's our conversation this morning. And joining me in studio is Daniel Efa, who is a global business analyst, and economist Abiola Adekunle from Keto Markets. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know. You came in this morning giving off the vibe that you did not enjoy the Girlfriend's Day that we celebrated on August 1st. What is going on? Mr. Daniel, did you enjoy the Girlfriend's Day?
He came with the vibe.
You came with the vibe. Okay, so now let's start from the top because I want us to begin with the headlines themselves. The NNPC conversation, the CBN regulation, the electricity market reforms. And when we talk about electricity, a lot of things come to our mind. Massive investor demand for the treasury bills and the higher imports for vehicles. Now, when you step back and look at the stories individually, what do they collectively tell us about the direction of Nigeria's economy? Let me start with you, Daniel.
So I think that when we look at the stories, I think it's just a function of what's happening currently. Like some of the conversations have to do with existing policies. While some of them are benefits or an effect of an existing policy. For example, if I start, for example, with the car import issue, for example, conversation. Even though it is just a trading partner, it is just the US data of cars exported to Nigeria that we are getting. But it gives the idea that that particular industry is moving very, very fast, and that is majorly due to the tariffs, right? So there's been a lot of changes in tariffs for used cars. The duties was around 15%, now around 5%. For passenger vehicles was around maybe 70, now 40%. I think even electric vehicles are practically free. You can import they're duty free. So when you look at those figures, in fact, when US is just one of them, we still have cars from Europe, cars from China, even Canada also, right? So when you look at those figures, we might begin to see that there's actually a very big surge when it comes to car imports, as people are now considering it a lucrative option, and the demand is probably most likely getting higher, and because of that fact. And the reason why we can also capture that kind of data directly is because the bottlenecks is reducing gradually at the port. So what we had 10-15 years ago was that data would most likely tilt towards Togo or Benin Republic rather than Nigeria. Right? So, but now that we are seeing the direct conversation of almost $1 trillion makes sense in terms of policy change or policy effect, just a fiscal policy effect that has driven a market to get to a whole new level. And that is basically what we talk about, in the sense that if you want to drive demand, government has to make some sort of concession. If you don't, there are two ways. Either you say you take the 15% and reduce the demand for that product and kill businesses in that sector, or you simply reduce the taxes there and give people more incentive to do business in that. And that is what we talk about for every of the sectors, that we need governments to, or we need a lot of activity. I sort of, for example, same thing. You need government to come in and say, we want this sector to grow at this also rate, right? This is what we are willing to do in terms of set up infrastructure, in terms of regulatory conversation, in terms of policies that will drive businesses to ensure that they are doing well. So that is one effect of what government has done, that is basically giving that result. At the end of the day, your 5% duty might making way more money than when it was 15% and demand was basically lower.
No. Okay. Now let me come to you, Mr. Bella. Do you have a different opinion? And who do you think, among all of this, actually the people I just listed, is really responsible for driving Nigeria's economy today?
Well, the driving of economy is generally a concussion. You know, it's a whole lot of things coming together to achieve the same thing. So we cannot really say it's one thing, because there are even things you did not mention that are quite important in terms of pushing the economy forward right now. Just to add to what Daniel said in terms of car purchases, there are two things I noticed, and we've discussed it before, that we see a lot of cars now coming in from China, and because of the way their plants and manufacturing is structured, it's now almost autonomous, meaning that there is little human intervention in it. So the plants can keep producing day and night. And when the country is saturated, that's China, for example, the next place is for them to export as much as possible. So now we are now seeing cheaper cars that are newer, and this is changing the minds of people, because instead of me buying a 10-year-old car for 30 million, I can actually get a 2024, 2025 brand new car, because irrespective of where cars come from, whether US, whether China, whether anywhere, if it's a brand new car, you'd at least drive it for 3 years before hearing any story about Kazim or anybody start being your friend. So now, another aspect to it is, because I'm close to the financial sector, I'm actually in the financial sector, I also know that a lot of lenders don't like giving out credit for you to purchase or finance a used car. So now that we have cheaper cars that are in the purview of people that can actually afford it, you now see more creditors, more financial companies coming out and say, okay, no problem, we'll finance 100 cars for this company, because now the cars are marginally cheaper, they are brand new, which is what all these lenders actually like. So this can also be part of what contributes, or what is contributing to the influx of cars in the country. Talking about the other sectors, NNPC and the rest, I think the government is just trying, which is what the government should do, to push on all fronts and see how we can arrive at a place where the pot of soup is sweet, because you have to have the protein, the pepper, and everything. So they are trying, but we still have a long way to go. But sincerely, one way or the other, I think the country, if we look at the past 1 or 2 years, is getting marginally better. But if you look at the last 10 years, then the story is different.
Okay, so now when we look at collectively, we look at what these government institutions are doing. That's the CBN tightening supervision, the FCCPC wanting to harmonize electricity regulation, and then the NMDPRA, who is also talking about the African fuel benchmark, the price benchmark. I want to put the price there. Now, the NNPC too, that posted these commercial numbers. What do you think the government is doing? Do you think that they are becoming a better market manager, or is it becoming too dominant in the economy? I'm trying to...
So it's usually a thin line between being a better market manager and being too hands-on. Reason being that most central banks cannot run the economy on a dual system, in terms of either you are tightening or you are losing, right? So you can only do one at a time based on whatever problems you are facing, right? So the CBN at the moment is faced with high inflation and also high liquidity. The amount of money circulation outside of banks is way too much.
It's so much.
It gets so the tightening solves both problems, right? Tightening because of inflationary pressures and tightening because of high liquidity in the economy.
But
Right?
does it really solve inflation?
Yes, if the inflationary pressure conversation is demand based, right?
No, we got to assume
Yes. So ours is supply based. However,
Yes.
it doesn't still remove the fact that they still need to do something. They cannot look right because the transmission of any other mechanism will take longer, right? Which is the fiscal, right? Setting up infrastructures and all those things will take a longer time, right? So it's better to tight what you can tight, which is usually the purview of the CBN, right? So, for example, because of this tightening, they've been able to manage liquidity properly. For example, see the OMO bills, right? OMO bills has done almost 300-400% in its subscription. Right? Most of the FPIs, the banks are pushing funds there, so it makes sense in terms of being able to manage liquidity, and not allow us to get to a point where we now have so much cash chasing few goods. So either way, right, the other part of the inflation, which we know is structural, right, cannot be solved by the CBN. Exactly. So the conversation there is that you cannot, because what the CBN was faced with was that there was an inflation from supply side. There was no money. There was no money in the reserve. So either way, you need to solve a problem, because it's not like we were making so much money from crude that we could use that to balance that. So the tightening, it's hurting the economy, but then it's not also hurting the economy. Why? Because what is making our economy interesting is because it's largely informal than formal, right? So I was doing a normal what's the word, analysis, right, of the real sector, right? Do you know that since, for example, prices of petrol, anything went up, right? You would hardly see someone in the informal sector charging what they were charging when it was 100 naira. You hardly see your organizer that was doing 15 naira for me before Tinubu made the announcement. It's minimum 250. So if you look at the numbers, every informal player has also moved at the price level. It is only the people in the formal sector, which is surprising, that actually suffer the brunt from the CBN, because you are the ones that pay taxes. You are the ones that are faced with whatever VAT increase and all. Exact. So that is where we are, right? But then whatever needs to be done in terms of where do we go from here, it has really basically left the CBN's job. CBN has done its own job properly in terms of now we now have a stable naira, which is one of the biggest issues. Then we now have a stable naira, which means that you can plan with naira now. Unlike before. Exactly. So when you look at all those conversations, right? Because what I would say, what I basically say is, okay, what could we have done differently if I was a CBN governor? And I'm telling you, most likely it will not be extremely different from whatever the current CBN is doing.
Okay, it's looking like you have. It's looking like you have a different opinion entirely, kind of, Mr.
Yeah, well, my own mindset is we keep saying that there is. The things we can do in terms of infrastructure is going to take time. We've been saying this for 10 years. How long time exactly is it going to take? Because if you don't start something, you never finish.
Truly.
There's a proverb in my this thing that if you don't go, you cannot come. So if you don't start putting in effect value chain for agriculture, fixing power properly, not all these bandages and plasters. These are things that countries have conquered decades ago, if not centuries ago, or let me say a century ago. People have conquered stable electricity. We're talking about roads, everything we need to construct with in the country. Then the pressure will keep mounting on institutions like the CBN, because tightening the policies cannot fix the inflation issue on ground. It cannot fix it, because it is multifaceted. There are so many other things that key into that inflation. While inflation is marginally reducing, food inflation is going up.
True.
So we need to start looking at it from a broader perspective. We need to start calling on other ministers to actually step up and do their jobs. Because if they don't, then we keep having this pressure and this roundabout talk about what CBN can do and cannot do. CBN, like you said, they are doing their stuff. But to a large extent, it's not enough. Because they are just one part of it. Yeah. Now, what is the Ministry of Agri doing? What's the Ministry of Power doing? What's the Ministry of Works and Housing doing? There are so many of them that we are not getting what we are meant to get from them. So at the end of the day, if CBN is doing 100%, and every other person is doing 10%, you find out that the average is less than 20%.
Because we all need them to balance like, at least 50% from different sectors. And to add to what you said about the infrastructure aspect, I think most times when there's planning, we can actually get something. Because you see some people, for example, somebody wants to build a house or an office and they have a time limit that they want to actually achieve it. They end up doing that. So why is the government not using some of these approaches?
We have National Planning Commission. I'm just saying.
So but then the conversation that is why over time, right? Because of I think it's peculiar to us because I can't even see an African country get very close by in terms of economic size or economic activity. I can begin to compare us to in terms of infrastructural or how we get things done, right? Most times, a lot of our policies end on paper. A lot of them end on paper, and it makes it difficult for us to properly. In fact, maybe recently is when we started saying we want to implement a project and we are seeing it through. A lot of times we don't even see it through for a long time. Then someone just wakes up and says, why is this project pending for so long? Let's finish it. So it is usually not within the time frame we choose, which is the problem, because whatever drove us here, right, for the past 10 years, we cannot entirely say a lot of them are global economic issues. But then because of our lack of planning and lack of implementation of these things, we got to a point whereby we just became confused, and what we now started doing is let's just push the problem forward. And that's what we did till we got here, right? So now we got here, this current administration is say, okay, let us try and fix one or two things. But then it will still be a problem if what we've done is first aid, right? But then the proper treatment is yet to start. But if this administration doesn't still start
those proper treatment,
there will still be back here in 10 years.
Yes.
We'll still back here in 10, and that's basically. So that is the issue, and that is where the structural conversations need to come in, because if you compare where we are now, 2003 to 1999, in terms of economic state, it was almost the same thing. In fact, 1999 was a bit worse, right? Because we were under a military rule that squandered a lot of money. Inflation was around over 40%. Same thing. And what that government did then was structural, started with a lot of all these policies, and ended it up with setting a lot of structure, including debt forgiveness, including fiscal structure, right? So, but we are seeing something similar. The only difference is the fiscal conversation. That is why a lot of people are coming at the Minister of Finance saying what is happening with whatever has been saved from subsidies, and he's saying we are spending more, but you cannot. Of course, we know that spending is key to really setting up structures. But if you don't spend properly, you will still come back to
cycle back at the same zero, which is really true.
Do you know why I think that we might not do much even in the coming years? Is because the way our structure is, there is no consequence to whether you do your job or you don't do your job. Do you know why the UK keeps changing their PMs? It's because if you are not satisfactory and they bring you in front of the house, and some people are saying, no, we are not satisfied with what you are doing, okay, go. But you see a situation where a minister is appointed. The minister practically does nothing to improve the status quo. And the minister is still there for 2, 3, 4 years. It shouldn't be done. If you are in school, the reason why people read by fire by force is because they know that they don't read, the consequence will show in their exams.
Their tests and exams.
And at the end of the day, don't pass your exams, you will be there with a lot of carryover. But now in the economy, in the whole system, the Nigerian economy, that is meant to be even much more serious than a school setting, you see people appointed. We have more than 400 ministries, parastatals, and agencies. And you have a whole lot of them practically not doing what they are meant to do. When you come in, you are meant to do an appraisal. Yeah. What is on ground? What did I meet on ground? There's meant to be something like a people's forum. When you come after a year and say, this is what I met on ground, this is what I've done. If every minister knows that there's a tendency for them, that if I don't do what I'm meant to do, if I don't implement to social level, they might remove me from this position. You will be shocked at the level of development that will start happening. But because people know that what will happen, that is why you have the green lights on places like CBN and Ministry of Finance because they are much more, but there are so many at the back seats that are just hiding there, chorusing after every other person in class. Yes. So that is why you're seeing that some people are on overdrive, some people are doing nothing.
Okay, now let's look at the investors, right? Investors submitted 3.62 trillion naira for T-bills when only 700 billion naira was available. Now, why is it that investors are usually so eager to lend money to the government, especially when we have conversations around the fact that a lot of businesses are still struggling to or complaining about expensive credits?
Interest. Return on investment.
Safety.
Exactly. So safety, return on investment. See, the thing is, for example, for the OMO, for example, I think the last one was about 17% for 1 year. I don't know if I'm getting figures right. Okay. FPIs are jumping on it because when you compare globally, it's one of the highest, right? So for them first, it's not even about who the government is or not. It's about the fact that okay, it is, and this has continued. This is not a new trend. It started way from the last CBN, right? We always get oversubscribed because of the high interest that it poses. That's number one. Number two, is the fact that when you keep repaying promptly, for example, I think CBN did about maybe 34 trillion. Was it in June? You get completing like paying for the matured ones, the matured OMO bills and even the treasury bills. What it does is that it gives investors more confidence to keep bringing more money, right? So the returns is high, right? And it's for investors, nobody really cares as long as money comes in, they don't care. And so what it also does in the other, and that is one of the issues why economic policies are just two-edged sword. As long as one is dividing one, that is causing another problem. And the problem it's causing is that our banks are no longer seeing real sector as attractive anymore. Instead, they are just pushing the money to the CBN or the debt management office, whichever, whether it is T-bills or the OMO. So what is happening instead is that we're now seeing more corporate bodies now instead coming up with commercial papers, which you also need to give higher interest for you to be able to get people to subscribe for that. And when people subscribe higher interest because it's attractive, it means that you're in serious debt, you are paying back a whole lot, which shouldn't be the case. So either way, what we are doing is if it's not meant to be something that will last for long. I'm surprised that third year into the administration, almost 4 years, we are still running a very high interest rate regime, which I feel like it should have ended maybe from the second or third year, or even into the third year, because you are beginning to see a balance in the economy and a decline in inflation. Yes, of course, US and Iran didn't help matters, but you still need to show. You still need to show that particular that particular view that we don't plan to keep interest rates this high because we know that it will keep hurting the economy. But this is what we're trying to do. Give a time, and that's what happens with perception. You need to create the right perception. You need to create let your investors know this is what we're trying to do. We're going to ease out of this after a while. You get, because you can't keep what we want instead. What will help us as a country is actually FDIs, bring the money into the economy. Right? We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. But when you keep giving you like that, and you in turn, when you look at your fiscal, you are basically using it to just pay salaries and more salaries.
I wanted to quickly add to that. There are things that people don't understand about anything, bonds and all those that things that require you to bring in funds that give you a level of guaranteed returns. See, in the financial world, at the end of the day, when all those monies are gathered, somebody somewhere has to still spend that money, take some risk on that money.
Yes.
If it's a bank, if it's stocks, what your money you are keeping in banks are businesses.
Yes.
Because if they don't put those monies in businesses, at the end of the day, they will not be able to give you those returns. And those businesses have risk. So for me, it's not always a very good sign when the government of a country is the one having the highest level of, always raising funds. Because it somehow means that the private sector is almost not feeling well.
Yeah.
Because the private sector is going to be doing a whole lot. There are people who not even have enough money to say they're subscribing for one OMO or one bond or one T-bills or the other. But we always see it here that people are just pushing a lot of funds there because they feel that it is safety, it is cheaper for them as investors. But at the end of the day, it is debt to the nation.
Yeah.
If it's in the private sector, it is risk. I was into investment 2008, 9, 10, and the first time somebody brought money to me, I was so happy. Not knowing that it's debt. Because when it was time to pay back, I was like, how this matter won't be now. So at the end of the day, no matter what you invest in, somebody somewhere is going to sit down and spend that money in such a way that I can get some level of return. In the case of the country, what they are doing is that they are using it to pay salaries and maybe finance some infrastructural stuff. But at the end of the day, the money will come back from our resources and from our pocket. So how do you now continue to raise your resources to be able to pay your debts, develop the country, and still maintain a healthy budget?
Now, speaking about the private sector investment that is being crowded out, they are, right? How do they, is there a way that you think that they can actually find the balance, especially when we start talking about people throwing their money into government securities because of the safety and the interest rates? Because if they are finally crowded out 100%, it's also going to hurt us in a lot of ways. Is there a way that they can actually find the balance in this situation?
I think that balance comes from a lot of conversations. Okay. For example, while we say a lot of businesses are not seeing get such funds, some are also mentioned as in releasing fantastic numbers. And the stock market, for example, is doing very good numbers. So the way it's a very tricky conversation in Nigeria. Like you cannot because while you hear some people just come out and say we're having the best stock market in a long time, and you're wondering, and you're looking at the numbers or the real sector conversations of this same company, and wondering how is this company's share even at this value when they are not even doing as much. So it is more like just like I usually say, we're at the point where everybody is just looking at, yes, there's a lot of money available in circulation, but nobody trusts. Exactly, nobody trusts any business on ground, right?
Exactly.
I think was it June or July?
People just want to play Ponzi schemes with the financial sector.
Exactly. I think I was in Ghana. I was wondering the kind of coordination of the economy.
Yes.
You can easily come in as a new person and within the first 1 week see and identify a business that you can go into.
Yes, I agree on that.
And you're not worried about anything, because as long as you get your government regulatory conversation sorted, you are good to go. In fact, I was looking at was it drinks, and I was saying like there's seal on everything. So the confidence is there for a consumer, right? So
there's regulation there.
So exactly. So when you go back to Nigeria, you are not almost sure. In fact, Nigerian businesses are so unsure of what happens next that some people are saying anytime money comes, they'll shut it down, because regulatory wise we are not even there yet. So when you look at those things, you begin to wonder, how are these businesses even coping? Yeah, so we are in fact for food security, for example, I was just thinking when I said we are probably at the level whereby we are consuming very terrible quality, but nobody cares, because
nobody knows. We don't even know what
at this point it's scared. Because why? Because everybody's concerned about the pricing at the moment, that people are just consuming whatever is available.
He keeps complaining. Sorry, I'm saying this on TV. Whenever I go to Lagos, he comes out and he keeps complaining. And the last time he was like, if I'm going to Lagos next,
I'm not doing anything. Because why would I be taking fake? You can't fake. I am wondering what is happening. Like, so you can imagine. I think I was passing a certain hospital, one of the local governments in Lagos. If you see the crowd, I thought it was a church. I thought it was a hospital, so crowded. So I'm like, this is also a contributory factor. This is also a contributory factor, because people are not consuming healthy food that's increasing the rate of healthy Nigerians. So every of these things contributes to the conversation that we're having, that at the end of the day, if you don't solve the real sector issues, whatever is happening in the market, it's just like someone flying over your head. It's not happening really.
To summarize what he said, people want to dance around with their funds. They are 1 billion, 2 billion, hundreds of millions of dollars in T-bills and such money markets in the stock exchange. But when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to doing the real business, nobody wants to put their funds there. Why? Because you can give your funds to a company that the company is doing very well today. Yeah. The company is producing yogurts, and you put 500 million naira there. And you know that by your own projection, in the next 5 years, that 500 million might turn to 2 billion or 3 billion, and you'll be very happy. You can even pass it down to your children. But the government can come tomorrow, something can happen tomorrow, and they'll just shut down that company. No explanation, nothing. So how do you include that into your business plan? That is the major issue why nobody, not nobody, but a lot of people would rather go and play the safety net around T-bills, giving money to the government, going to the stock exchange, going in and out, than giving it to the real sector. Not that the real sector is not more profitable. They are by far more profitable. But because there is no standardization, because SOMAB is not doing their work as much as possible, because maybe NAFDAC is not doing their job as much as possible.
NAFDAC came out to say they are understaffed. They are understaffed. There are 2,000 staff instead of 20,000. So how can you even manage quality for drugs?
Go to some pharmacies, you see a lot of products there that don't have NAFDAC number. And when I talk about products, I'm talking about only drugs. Even chin-chin, even anything that has to be produced to be publicly consumed, that will be stored for a while, should one way or the other have a NAFDAC number.
Okay, that is it. Now, let's look at ahead of Nigeria's economy when we place all of these stories line by line, and it may be imagine drawing it may be pie charts today, looking at how much influence belongs to what is happening in Nigeria's economy. How much of this influence do you think is centered around the government, investors, market sentiments, or consumers?
So I think that government is a major player.
Okay.
The reason why it's a major player is it's two ways. It's either you are the coach or you're actually wearing a jersey to play. And that is what, and our own government at the moment is actually on the field, which is not necessary. Because when you set the infrastructure right, you just need to be a coach. You just need to watch. In fact, you need to be a referee, not even a coach, because then what you just need to do is allow everybody play their thing, right? So people should be able to come into Nigeria and say, I don't want to invest in markets. What I want to basically do is to set up a business in Nigeria. See, the thing is, we are positioned properly, right, in terms of the African market, right? Because now we are talking about African Free Trade Agreement. We're talking about energy pricing. We are all in that conversation, right? So if you say there's energy pricing benchmark today, our refineries will enjoy it. As in, Dangote refinery will enjoy it. Our crude oil will enjoy it. So anything that has to do with the African market, we are well positioned. So then, what is the problem that we are really that people prefer to come and give money to CBN or stock market instead of to set up shop? So that question is what the government should be seeking to answer. And that is, if they can solve that problem, I think that every other thing, markets, individuals, corporate bodies, investors, will just play to the tune of whatever the government dictates. And that is basically how it works.
So now let me come to you, Mr. Biola. When we look at all of this and adding to what Daniel said, who do you think should really be driving Nigeria's economy, let's say from now to the next 5 years, if we get it right?
Okay, I don't want to add, I want to subtract.
Okay.
The same reason why you see somebody, or why you see a lot of young guys now or young girls saying that they are entrepreneurs instead of actually becoming employees, is the same thing if you extrapolate it and make it larger that is going on wrong with Nigeria. There are so many people that have no business in business. All you need to do is get a good job. Get a good job and work there. Because I also tell people that even if you want to start a business, it's good for you to work somewhere first. There are some things you will learn that will help you in your own business. But people are not doing business because they want to. People are actually doing it because they want to survive. There are a lot of people that they have no business there, but they do it because there's nothing else to do. There are no jobs, no factories, no industries that they can actually work in. So we have to do the first things first. That is what the government needs to do. And like I said earlier, we don't need to keep pushing it and say, oh, when will infrastructure come? We will start the long-term project. Let's start it now. Let's start it now. The reason is because, okay, let me tell you a very short story. In the early 80s, my father worked with the government to travel a lot. So he said there was a time he went to Ghana. And that was early 80s. And he finished their lectures and he was going back to take his bus back to his hotel. And he saw a queue, in front of the bus from afar. So he started running. And he running, and as he was running, he pushed everybody away, entered into the bus very fast and sat down, and he was feeling like a sharp guy, only for him to look up, and everybody were looking at him. Like, is this man okay? What's going on with this man? Because that's the lifestyle over here. We're always rushing. And in 60, 70 years, we have not made as much progress as those that were not rushing and those that were queuing. So I'm no more in the school of thought of, hey, Ashab, let's quickly do. Let us stop all these theatrics and slow down as a country. And say, okay, whatever has happened has happened. How far we have come without getting into that? Let us now start all over again. What is the basics of a developing country, a country that is aiming to be a first world country? Okay, power. After power, industrializations. Let's stop there. Let's start those two steps. Anything apart from that is just you repairing things on top of the faulty foundation.
Which is really, really crazy. Now, thank you so much for that. Now, before we go, let's look at the business term, market sentiment. That is going to be our business word for today. Now, market sentiment is the overall mood or confidence of investors and businesses about the direction of the economy or financial markets. Now, when you hear or see on screen that investors rush to buy treasury bills or stocks, like we stated earlier, it often reflects positive market sentiment, even if consumers are still struggling with high prices. And that's it on the business word for today. Thank you so much, Economist Sabiola and Daniel, for being on the show today. Thank you to you too. So at the end of the day, every economic report tells a story, but the real test isn't just whether profits are rising, markets are climbing, or investors are optimistic. The real test is whether those numbers eventually translate into better businesses, more jobs, and a better quality of life for everyday Nigerians. That's our conversation today, and we'll keep helping you make sense of the numbers. My name is Divine Alex, and this has been Business Lens of Rapid Television. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.